Okay, so unless you're an awards nerd, you likely haven't watched a lot of the films up for Oscars this year. And even if you are an awards nerd, you're probably not going to watch too much outside of the big contenders. But in February 2011, internet journalist and Aaron Sorkin botherer Sarah Bunting went a step further, creating something she called the Oscar death race. The premise is simple. To win the Oscar death race, you must watch every single film nominated at that year's Academy Awards before the ceremony airs. Not just the Best Picture nominees, but everything with at least one nomination. So if you did the Oscar death race in 2016, you watched Moonlight and La La Land, but you also saw Suicide Squad and Trolls. You don't have to watch them all in theaters, you don't even have to watch them through legitimate avenues, you just gotta watch them all by whatever means possible. This year there's 56 unique nominated films, which is about how many there are every year. If that sounds like a lot, consider that 15 of them are shorts. And that's a fixed number every season, so you can bang out a quarter of the death race in about as much time as it takes to watch Zack Snyder's Justice League. That still leaves 41 feature-length films though. If you're thinking, that's easy, I'll just watch one film every 8.9024 days, then you're getting ahead of yourself. Most of the films aren't released until later in the year, and we don't know the nominees until like a month and a half before the Oscars. Now if you're thinking, oh my god, I have to watch 1.0976 films every day, you clearly haven't developed a strategy. Here's how I tackled the Oscar death race. In your typical award season, it takes a while before you really know who the contenders are. Sometimes a film looks really promising on paper, and then it comes out and gets demolished by critics. Sometimes a film has everything lined up, and then it gets delayed an extra year and everyone forgets about it. Sometimes a film is crushing it at festivals, and people are declaring it a Best Picture frontrunner, and then
troubling allegation.
So it takes at least until the summer before you've really got your first glimpse at what films are getting serious buzz. This year had major releases like Da 5 Bloods, Tenet, and The Trial of the Chicago 7. You can look at these three films, the positive receptions they received, the big-name talent behind them, and it's not hard to assume they're gonna get nominated for something. They were all in Best Picture talks at some point in their lifespan and had buzz for several categories beyond that. Then a Pixar movie came out, and those always get nominated for Best Animated Feature. And while you're out, you might as well watch some of the action tentpole movies so you can cover some of the technical nominations. And just like that, you've got a head start months before the award season has properly begun. As the precursors draw nearer, you want to keep an eye on the acclaim that smaller films are getting, and remember that your goal isn't necessarily to go for the films that are going to win a ton of trophies, but for the safest bets for a nomination. If you really have no idea, look around at publications like Gold Derby or Variety or Vanity Fair to get an idea of what people are predicting. Predictions and odds do change over time, but it's really rare that something considered to be a hard lock later in the year doesn't get nominated. For example, there was no way on earth that Ma Rainey's Black Bottom wasn't going to be at least nominated for Chadwick Boseman's performance. Same goes for Carey Mulligan in Promising Young Woman and Anthony Hopkins in The Father. Except you can't see The Father because by October 2020, it's only ever been screened in a tiny drive-in on the moon one time 5 months ago. And no one's entirely sure that it's a real movie that exists. Yeah, accessibility is one of the biggest hurdles. 2020 is actually a great year for the Oscar death race, since it means that almost everything will be streaming before the Oscars. In previous, and presumably future years, there's always some films that have a limited release right before the Oscar eligibility deadline, and then it's weeks before it gets a wide release. And then you gotta drive out to the one theater that's showing Phantom Thread in the whole state. And if you're not in the US, well, I hope you don't mind cam rips. At this point, you can be fairly confident about a lot of the list. All of the movies getting buzz will have released somewhere, and major precursor awards have started announcing their winners. You've probably already seen the likeliest Best Picture contenders at this point, so now you want to look for down-ballot opportunities. This year, another round had shown up at every precursor for Best International Film, so even though it was unlikely to get more than one nomination, it's still smart to view it before nominations come out. You also start to see more locks for acting nominations, like Vanessa Kirby and Riz Ahmed. And if you really want to stay ahead of things, you can look at the shortlists that are usually released around now. These will show you the 10 to 15 films eligible for a handful of categories, including the short films. However, I'd refrain from watching the top shorts unless you're really confident. The awards community is generally much worse at predicting shorts nominees than the other categories, and many of them don't become available until later anyway. Once nominations come out, it's time to fill in the cracks. Films that you never paid attention to suddenly snuck in with one or two unexpected nods. Maybe you made some mistakes, like hitching your wagon to First Cow. And the documentary branch always subverts everyone's expectations, so now you gotta watch a couple documentaries you didn't even realize were in contention. But you finally got the full list. So all that's left to do is join the Oscar Death Race subreddit and beg for a copy of The Man Who Sold His Skin. You're in the final stretch, and at this point it's too late to quit. So why go through all this effort for something with no extrinsic reward beyond a slightly cooler Letterboxd profile? Well, I wondered the same thing until this season. I really had no good excuse not to do it, so I gave it a shot for the first time. I've still got a handful of films left to watch, but I'm really surprised by how much fun this is. I went into this expecting a few great films and an onslaught of lengthy, boring duds, but that's not the case at all. There are so many little treats that I would have never even considered watching, especially in the documentary and international feature categories. Going into films like Better Days and My Octopus Teacher without any prior knowledge was so rewarding. Sure, the Oscars are the biggest award show in Hollywood, so it's not like you're watching films no one has heard of, but seriously, who out there is talking about how great The Mole Agent is? I was also impressed by the variety on display. I expected mostly dour historical dramas, but I got a Will Ferrell musical, a quirky Regency comedy, a George Clooney sci-fi, a film that brought back my severe fear of puppets, a Tom Hanks western, a Tom Hanks battleship movie, a Tom Hanks cameo in a damn Borat movie. If anything, these films prove how the Academy is deliberately limiting themselves when it comes to Best Picture, since they're clearly well aware of a wide spectrum of films. I don't know if I'm going to do the Death Race again next year, but I'm definitely going to look into every single one of the films to dig up the gems. But, maybe I'll skip the next Hillbilly Elegy. Thanks for watching.